Can you say that loud again? I couldn't hear you.
My first father's God, but my first earth dad is you.
So what's the difference between me and God?
It's this God is in heaven and you're in earth. That's the difference.
And where is heaven? Where do you know where heaven is?
Mind.
In mind. Yes. It's inside you, isn't it? Fiona, have you ever left heaven?
No.
That's right. Come up here and let me see your face. I love you.
I love you, Dad.
I am of the pure mind of God. I am the resurrection and the life in my body, my finances, my relationships, and my world. I qualify everything in my world with perfection. I am perfection. I am this perfect day, and the life that lives in me is the light that cannot fail. I accept only God's perfection, His good, in my outer circumstances. I know in my heart that God is all in all. I am absolutely not concerned about what happens, because I know wonderful things are happening now.
Welcome. So this transmission is going to be called the Eye of God. Now, correlating with this will be the new technique that you will learn if you do attend the workshop in October. The link is below. The Great Consummation, the Lovers Retreat Getaway. That is the retreat in beautiful Door County, Wisconsin. So all of this comes to me, and I just let the divine just take the floor, if you will. Reflecting on, here I am in Sheboygan. What is this place? Where does this feeling take me? Where does this feeling take me? The feeling gets the blessing. Reverend Ike said that. The feeling gets the blessing. Everything is a blessing. It's either a direct blessing or leading you to a direct blessing through a learning or an understanding. You know, the idea here is that if you don't want to be a moron, then you have to get the less on, okay? If you don't want to be a moron, you got to get the less on. That came to me in my dream last night. That exact verbiage. If you don't want to be a moron, then you must get the less on. Okay? The lesson is the blessing. So, I'm walking through this space right here. Essentially, this space is neutral. If you remove persons, conditions, qualities of good and evil, matter altogether, you strip away the unreal and you identify with the real. What is the first principle here? First principle is that God is purifying His own creation. And you're in that creation, you are of that creation. So you're in an ascension process of purification of mind, so that all that is left is God's eye, seeing God's own reflection. Now, if you walk through this valley of the shadow of death, which means it's a counterfeit, fictional, centrifugal, dielectric, you see what I'm saying? Flickering in and out of existence, these particles of matter, so-called matter, they're just appearing as form. And then the carnal mind, the human mind, is trying to take form and create reason from it. It's trying to find a cause, which is the onset of reasoning. That's why they say reasoning is of the devil, because it's of this world. This world is what they call the devil in the Nag Hammadi library, because it is the interpretation. It's the interpretation that we are making based on false appearances and looking for a cause within those false appearances. So here, I'll give you an example. Perfect example for you to chew upon. If you lean on human reasoning, you won't get very far in life. And that's the current state of condition that most of the so-called people find themselves in, because they have turned away from themselves and they've given themselves to this outer world. Now, according to this outer world, what happened recently with Sabrina and I is they said, oh, they're not together anymore. Well, something must have happened. Well, it's true. Something actually did happen. So what happened is that we came to our true selves. And in that knowledge of our true self, we no longer are babies in our spiritual walk. Now, consequently, if you go ahead and you look at this from the eyes of God's eyes perspective, when I walked into Sabrina's environment today, when I walk around this space, my mind goes all the way back to when I was a little 5-year-old boy, just like my daughter Fiona, growing up in my grandma's house. So Sabrina is essentially, relationally speaking, my grandma 2.0. Now, when my grandma 1.0 transitioned, okay, I was about 23 years old. And at the time, I lost this sense of covering along where my spiritual journey was taking me. My grandma was a very loving and gracious personality, if you will. She accepted me. The key word is that she accepted me for me. She accepted my path, my journey. Now, Sabrina comes in the picture immediately following that, and she becomes the continuation of that spiritual growth cycle that I had to inevitably complete at some point. And likewise, you could say that the lesson that Sabrina got from me was an equal value exchange, because in God's economy, the supply and demand are always equal, and there always is the supply to meet every demand. So we meet not for the first time. We meet for the purpose of getting the lesson and rising into our own awareness of our true selves. And we only ever meet our true self. There is only one man, one manifestation. The Christ mind is the only creation. So, knowing this first principle, I sensed today, and I just told Sabrina, I said, hey Sabrina, you were my grandma. And, well, she liked that perspective. She gets it. Now I'd be curious to find out who I was to her. Well, I have a pretty good idea who I am. So, the idea is that everyone you are relating with is you. And the whole big scheme of things is to get you to love more, to be more vulnerable, to be blameless, and to celebrate life with joy, carefreeness. If you can get those components down pat, what that makes up is it makes up what human beings call self-esteem. So self-esteem built in the world is a facade. You go out and you get nice clothes, you get the appearance of success, but yet you forfeit the authentic authority that gives you perpetual success. And the world is very good at teaching you these things. They teach you the dog-eat-dog competitive nature of the carnal mind with all of its reasoning. And you strengthen that personality in the world, and you go out and you gather all your treasures. Okay, that's the way the world wants you to do this. It's not right or wrong. It's just the world's opinion made manifest. And it's all based on a temporal dream. And if you want to move past the temporal and you want to actually obtain, this is the idea. If you want to, get this, if you want to obtain what God has already given you, your inheritance, the Father's will, it's all the same thing. If you want to be in the Father's will. Not everybody who's out there prospering is in the Father's will, by the way. If you want to be in the Father's will and gain the inheritance, the knowledge that you never left heaven and that you already are one with the Christ, you have to rise out of these false illusions. You have to understand from the eye of God where you are in time and space, if you will, on this trajectory, so that with supernatural insight you can adjust your compass and you can steer yourself due north as the risen ether out of the four elements. Now, here's how you could tangibly look at what I just said. Look at your bank account. Do you wish it was bigger? Look at your body. Maybe you wish it was smaller. Look at your relationship. Maybe you wish it was more romantic. Whatever you seem to find a disconnect with, in that space right there, it's because you're looking at it from human eyes and not the eye of God. That's your tell. But here, what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it? Well, what I've discovered along my journey for nearly 2 decades now, actually it has been 2 decades and a couple years actually, probably about 22, magic number 22. Creation and destruction, magic number 22. Isn't that something? No wonder my life looks like this in the 22nd year of my study. So, what I've learned, and it began with the works of Phineas Parker's Quimby, is I began looking at how man lives in his belief. That was Phineas Parker's Quimby. Well, he came and protéged with Mary Baker Eddy. He taught Mary Baker Eddy a few things along her journey. And she took that and developed something even far greater, in my opinion. She was the greatest of all in the flesh. That was next in line to the Christ, if you will. What she discovered is that divine love always has, always does, and always will meet every human need. So here you have these two components. You have this idea that man lives in his belief and divine love meets every human need. Well, what I've discovered along the way, and this is quite oversimplification of this, is how to merge the two together and how to stop and correct in every seeming disconnected space and to readjust and to realign with your true self, which brings about the corresponding inheritance that you were already given. It's quite profound, and I'm going to teach you how to do that in 3 magical days that are going to be beyond your expectations. So, realistically speaking here, I know that a lot of people are struggling right now. And it really, from the eye of God, it makes no sense whatsoever. Because there are just as many resources available today as there were 20 years ago. In fact, even more. But it's the human stupidity that creates these cycles of recession, depression. All of this insanity is from the human mind. Well, what you're going to discover is, if you've been walking this journey for some time, you've seen this in your life. You've seen moments of the Christ revealing itself as you. And that's the whole point, is you're going to notice that as you recognize that you don't have a problem, you're just not seeing the fullness of God's presence. And that's where the idea comes in of how do you get there? How do you do this? Well, I first discovered the PTT, which is still an extraordinary way to tap into this power, to break the continuity of evidence of the linear logical reasoning mind in its so-called law of flesh. And you see, just like any other law, if you break the continuation of evidence, you don't have anything. You have nothing. You have no claim. So there's no claim of matter that can stand in there when you keep breaking that apart. You keep breaking the vicious cycle of fear, doubt, and worry, which equals your concern over things. Now, what happens is when you lose your concern over things, you start to open up the non-judgmental space of pure awareness. And in the pure awareness, you recognize yourself as pure awareness, and the solution is made manifest through the receptive consciousness that is aware of its own deity. Now, that's the simplified version of how you do this, and you do it through altered states, alpha and theta brainwaves. If you try to do it when you're in a hurried, rushed state of, overcomplication, trying to make something happen, trying to force your will upon things, trying to be important in the world, or any of these ego-based delusions, if you proceed to operate from that capacity, you will get answers, and they will bring about unintended side effects. The human way is to force itself in a process called rape, a forced performance. So the human mind is essentially a rape on God's creation, or an attempted rape. And that's what it is. And that's why they say it's enmity against God. It's always that strife. Strife is the law that perpetuates that ignorant sense of self. And that ignorant sense of self is the belief in two powers, the belief in good and evil, and the idea that you came from a earthly mother and father. And then you backtrack all of that evidence forward, and you bring about the conclusion of your self-image. And according to your self-image, it is done to you. And that goes to the book of John. If you ask anything in my Father's name, it shall be given unto you. Well, here's the idea. If you ask anything, what are you? You're the image and likeness of the Father. So what do you think the Father's name, what do you think the Christ's name is? The image and likeness of the Father. Self-image. So when you've adopted the image of the self of this world through all of your past reasoning, you will find it impossible to manifest as your true self, the living ascended Christ. And to manifest your true self as the living ascended Christ, this is what the eye of God is. This is the technique. So with the technique, you have to reinforce it for a season. You have to learn to sustain it. It's not like you're just going to one day step into it fully and completely. It reminds me of when I had to overcome the anxiety and panic disorder sequence. And I learned some of the things from Dr. Claire Weeks of how to step into this Eye of God process from her book that taught a special way of relaxing and letting go when the terror was taking you over. You see, the world itself, the world of fashion form, this illusion, is just a very subtle form, which could become as acute as a panic attack, but it's a very subtle form of an anxiety disorder. It's a troubled state of mind. That's what anxiety is. Well, most people walk around focusing on, guess what? All of their troubles. And it creates an agitation that comes out of rest. And that's what the dialectic is. It's agitation born out of rest. And so when you learn how to put everything back to rest, rest in peace, dead to the world, alive in spirit, you are then atoned at one, being in togetherness with the Christ, which, by the way, is our trademark new formation of the new ministry. Atone, being in togetherness at one. So similar to how you're going to grow in this process and you're going to escape the old dogma of your personal history, your personal history is a religious dogma. It is the religar, the binding to of this world through the false doctrines of men. And all of the traditions of men are what hold it in place because they keep you troubled. They keep you fearful. They keep you creating duality. And as long as you keep creating those judgments of right and wrong, good and evil, left and right, up and down, you are inescapably bound and tied to the world of flesh and the law that governs its strife. And so PTT was a stepping stone, and this year I've learned how to step above it and to use what I call the eye of God. And it brings the culmination of all the teachers, from Phineas Parkhurst Quimby to Mary Baker Eddy to John G. Lake to Andrew Womack to, where did I go next? Joel Goldsmith, Herb Fitch, Alice A. Bailey. There were so many more that I could mention. I put together all these pieces voraciously in my science lab of meditation daily. So there's one key, is that we are having daily meditations at this retreat because you must have a ritual of daily meditation. And so what I'm going to do is I've learned how to speed up that process so you don't have to take as long to get the truth impregnated into your unconscious, if you will. You simply rise above into altered states of brainwave activity, consciousness states. And in those consciousness states, you are able to do a specific protocol that I played around with for many months. And I think I found something that really does 10x your self-image. I found the keys to self-image. And when I started doing that, my physical relationship changed to mirror that self-image, because that's the way this goes. Self-image is not just how you think you look in the world. It's the reflection of whether you are of this world or you are of the spirit. And so I ended up metaphysically and metaphorically leaving my grandmother's house and coming into my mature spiritual identity. And as the mature spiritual identity, this is a whole nother set of teachings, it's a whole new walk. That's why a whole new ministry is born. Allow Ministries is for the intermediate or beginning journey of walking into yourself as the Christ. It's the revelation that I am the Christ and I never left heaven. You see, you consciously know that. And now with the new ministry, Atone, being in togetherness, you demonstrate that. And you start to take on all of your Father's inheritance. And you start to live as the Christ. You no longer are the old you. And the things around you begin to reflect the new reality that you've just rediscovered as your home in the kingdom of heaven with the Father. And that's what this is coming to. And this is the advanced lesson. And so along with this training, we're going to have the advanced level 2 spiritual healing practitioner training, because you add this onto your original level 1 training. When you add this onto it, this is when you start to simply just be present wherever you are, and your environment will change to match that consciousness. It was something that you can read about, when Mary Baker Eddy would just look at somebody, they would just transform right in front of her, back to their perfect self that God created. You'd call that like an instant healing. Well, when I started hearing about that stuff years ago, and I started looking at her daily habits and rituals of how she got there, I recognized, her spending 3 to 5 hours a day in a meditative, contemplative state of divine truth is how she prepared her consciousness. And then when she says 2/3 is love, then it really made sense to me. The gnosis part I spent the majority of the day in that contemplative state. But love was the next answer. Love, the lover's retreat, love. Love is the secret. You must be able to open yourself up to the highest degree of love possible to activate all of these blessings. Without the love, you are still young in your in your walk. You are still early on in your ascension process. And just because you think, well, all I got to do is just start loving, here's the revelation. Until you bring up everything that is discordant and you look at it through the eye of God and you bring the truth to it, you can't open yourself up to be the Father's love because you're still holding on to that part of the old self. So level 2 is you have to let go of your old self completely. Your life is going to change. Your life is over as you knew it. You are now the risen Christ piercing through the dark fog of this collective dream. And it really is a master's journey. It's a journey for someone who wants to be a master. Someone who wants to be the light, which you are called to do. It's a calling, and you feel it within yourself. And if you answer the call, then you'll find yourself right where you're supposed to be. You can't make a mistake. And so I'm sending out the message for you to answer the call that I'm sending out. I'm saying we're going on this journey. This is where it's all been leading. This is where it's going. And take it all the way. Many, many people have gotten some incredible demonstrations. I speak to a lot of 50 plus that are my proteges that speak to me on the Zoom sessions that are recorded for them. And that's part of the package too. You can see on the offering that it'll be final call for my discounted pricing if you want to get the 20 session V.I.P, which is 10 hours of clock time, 30-minute sessions, 20 of them. I recommend you do them once a week or once every other week. Maximum benefits that way. And you'll be able to use what I call the eye of God and work with me synergistically so we can go ahead and just clear the fog. Everywhere you go, we're going to clear the fog. You see, I know how to do this. I know because God shows me at every turn what the next step is. Just like I'm walking on these steps right here, you can see them behind me. I'm walking one step at a time, one step at a time, one step at a time, and here I am back in the garden again. That's where you are. That's where we must go, is to the next step. And so it seems like every year God gives me a whole new directive, a whole new agenda, a whole new season. It's like going to school. Every year you graduate, you go to another level, and the curriculum changes, but yet you're still on the same path, graduating, coming to your ascension. So I've got this ready for you, and I'm working on it right now, and I will tell you that it sure does feel good. It really does. I'm breaking through the deepest layers of love that I've believed that I could just kind of side skirt out of here and not have to deal with, which you may be thinking as well. And here's your indicator. Look around you in all of your relationships. Every little area of discord, these little arguments, these little fights, this little bickering between, this little judgments and resentments, anything you think is benign is not benign in the eye of God. And you won't escape the lesson. You don't get to graduate until you pass the exam. You have to ace the exam, because all that can remain at the end of this is the eye of God witnessing its own creation. And the benefit for you is every step of the way, your self-image increases. And see, self-image according to God's idea is you reflecting what God has already given you, so you don't have to chase these illusions. You see, the prosperity that you are becomes manifest in every moment, so that if you think of a need, you already know that the Christ has already gone before you and met that need. So you just say, hey, what am I thinking about? I'm not even who I used to be. This is the Christ's creation, and I am the Christ. And you don't just think it in your head, but it comes out of your heart because you removed all of the obstructions. There is a very specific protocol to do this, and it works in a way that is efficient and streamlined, and it brings about, get this, effective loving. Effective loving. See, your idea of unconditional loving may be that you allow things to just slide every now and then. You know, most people think, well, what is unconditional loving? I just allow things to slide. I forgave. That's not where the transformation takes place. Because here's the idea. I'm going to tell you the truth. You won't let it all slide. You think, oh, well, this one person owes me money. I let it slide. I have unconditional love. No, you don't. Let's make 10 other people do that. 10 other people do that, and you crack like a rigid oak tree in a storm, and you're like, that's it, and you just come unglued, you come undone. That's it. See, God's no fool. God knows you haven't cleared up anything. Your idea of unconditional love is simply a delayed sense of passive aggressiveness. Yeah, pinch yourself because you're dreaming. Effective loving is when you confront it head on. And when you look at the internal belief that is malaligned with the eye of God, and you have a tool set that you can rapidly change that belief and turn it into the truth which it is trying to be. It's trying to reflect light. And so when you bring light into that darkness, remember, Saint Germain talked about see, feel, and be perfection. If you are thinking you are unconditional loving because you swept a few things under the rug, you are not adhering to these three keys of seeing, feeling, and being perfection. You are just delaying the passive-aggressive nature of the carnal mind itself. Because I can say if I 10x all of your strife that is being cautiously overlooked by you, you will no longer be able to cautiously overlook it. You will collapse. And that, my friend, is a false self-image. And you see, whatever treasures you've built on a false self-image, they are just that. They are a house of cards. I've been there. I first manifested an 8,500 square foot mansion, $5.5 million estate that I took over and I lived in. I had $100,000 carpet in my office. I had over $500,000 of Sub-Zero refrigerators in pull-out drawers everywhere you could think of. I had a $50,000 stove with a French grill built right into it, and it was gorgeous. I had sports cars. I had time freedom. I had. But let me ask you a question. Why did it collapse like a house of cards? Why did that happen? Why do you think it happened? Well, I just told you. What happened was that I had climbed the top of a building. And unfortunately, that building did not have a spiritual foundation. I believed that I was unconditionally loving enough to sustain that self-image. And what happened was I ran into a few earthquakes, if you will, and those earthquakes took the whole foundation of all of it down to rubbish, to rubble on the ground. And I had to revisit and re-examine my life. And what I've discovered, and this is after 12 years, is that within me, all of those little things were showing up for me to bring the light to them, but I had not the process or the knowledge of how to do this. And today I do. And today I can teach you how to do this so that you don't have to climb the top of the building and be sitting there, and the first storm that comes along takes everything down with it. And that is what the ways of this world will do to you. The carnal mind of this world builds you up to break you down. It is designed that way. No good is the good but which God bestows. And until you identify as the Christ and you are effectively loving and you have cleaned the slate, forgiven 70 times 7 means to clean the slate. You must understand your Bible better than you think you do. You must realize that you wrote it and you're not going to escape it, because you must fulfill the law that is written within there for you to be in the completed works in heaven where you have never left. But you have to dream your way into your own self-purification. And then you wake up as the living Christ within. And I know this because I've been doing it for years. And I'm speaking to you in the process of doing it. And I'm saying, yes, you do want this. You have no idea how badly you want this. And your ego mind is saying, oh no, I don't want anything to do with love, and it's just not right. It's gross. I don't want to see you and Michelle kiss. I don't want to see any of that stuff. I just want to do things my way, and I just want to have everything that I desire come to me like The Secret said it would. And I'd say to you, well, you realize that that was a kindergarten lesson. You realize that the masses of this world accepted that because it was spiritual preschool. You do realize that, right? You do understand that the mass population are preschoolers in their ascension. They are at the lowest level of possible acceptance of this type of love. They are governed 95% strife, 5% Holy Spirit wisdom. But they are not to remain there. You see, at every level that you step up in the game, and that's why I call this spiritual special forces, is it becomes more elite and more elite and more elite and more elite, because not everybody is willing to do this. This is not just, rub your feet together and rub a magic lamp like The Secret says and you have a shiny new sports car. Who gives a crap? Who gives a crap if you got a sports car? You have no idea that that doesn't do anything other than distract you from what is real. And until you can be non-attached to all of it and still have it, then you don't know what you don't know. And what happens at the end of the day is you come to the completed works of your journey on this earth plane, and if you haven't cleared the slate, you get to come back again. Because you didn't, well, what did they do to you in school if you didn't pass? They flunked you and they sent you back. Do you know how many recycled karmic cycles are playing out right now in so-called people that you see around you? This is just a recycling of karmic thought, and it's coming to its own self-purification, but it keeps recycling in its own debris until the light shines. And so once the light shines, then you are free to be in the light with the Father, and you have come to your spiritual inheritance. And so at every juncture, we're going to stop and we're going to shine the light, and I'm going to show you how to do it, and that's why you should be there. Okay, so as an example here, I have a notebook here, and you must consciously do this with a notebook for a short season. You have to write things down. You have to create your memoirs, if you will. I want you to document the journey home. And if it's worth living, it's worth documenting, okay? So I'm going to teach you how to do this specific process called the Eye of God, and I'm going to show you how to walk through all of these little hurdles that are showing up for you again and again. You don't even see them. They're in plain sight. You can't even see them. But yet they keep showing up again and again and again because you haven't yet gotten through them. So the evidence, by the way, of you getting through them is the evidence of the Christ meeting every human need right in front of your lying human eyes in every moment, so that you have to take no thought whatsoever for any of it. The minute you have a thought of desire, it's already right in front of you and you have it. That's what happens on the other side of this. And it begins to come through in little waves, like Claire Weeks talks about. I talked about this in what I learned in her book. So when you have this anxiety state, which is what the state of the world is, you learn how to relax and how to float and how to just let go. And you see, in that space, you get moments of peace that come back, moments. For example, when I had anxiety disorder, I'd get like 2 minutes of peace in a given day. And I'd be like, oh my God, those 2 minutes. But see, those 2 minutes would turn into 2 hours next. And then I would get 2 days worth of peace. And then, maybe another panic attack, whatever. But I would get fleeting moments of peace come through. Well, what is Christ? It's the Prince of Peace. So I've discovered what she did does not only apply to anxiety disorders, because the world mind is an anxiety disorder. The world mind is a more subtle, sometimes even just as acute or even more acute state of an anxiety disorder. And so on one end of the spectrum, you could say on the red line, you've got sociopathic, psychotic beings that sniff cat shit so they can become totally immune to having any sort of human conscience. And these people like to work on Wall Street and other places where they can act as predators and they can prey upon their own brother and sister, which is the opposite of the gospel. So you could say they are the heathens. They are the, well, let's just say it doesn't end well for them, because they are so far from the truth that their soul doesn't get a chance to ever find peace. They're always looking for the next fix to sedate the pain that they create themselves within their own behaviors. That's on the far extreme end. And then on the other end, you have, well, the very, very subtle version of it, which I talked about, is the ones who claim that they are unconditionally loving and they go to church every Sunday, and what they do is they allow things to get swept under the rug. They don't actually address it as their own doing. See, they don't actually address it as their own consciousness coming to be purified through the characterization of someone else that looks to be happening in form. It's yourself. You meet yourself everywhere you go, and you're supposed to purify yourself. That's the big idea. And so on the light end of the spectrum, you have those that are just delaying the passive-aggressive nature of this world, mind. And then on the extreme end of the spectrum, you have the very, very aggressive, very hostile, predatory, and violent nature of this world. And because it is a law of the jungle reality out there, the ones who are the most violent and aggressive and nasty seem to be running the show. And yet none of it is happening anywhere out there. It's happening within thought. And it's for you to purify and for you to stop and correct at every moment. So with this documentation that you're going to make, you're going to start keeping tabs of these things. And you're going to correct them on the fly. And you're going to notice them shift. And when they shift, you're going to see massive, massive breakthroughs. And the ultimate goal of goals is for you to 10x your self-image by the end of this 3 days. So your mission is very simple. And I've laid out everything you need to get there. In September, I will be doing a class 2 of the Spiritual Healing Practitioner Training, which is a prerequisite for the Eye of God. You must go through the Spiritual Healing Practitioner Training. Your consciousness must be at a much more aware state of your self-identity than what you would say the average person is, at 5% Christ, 95% carnal ego. You must be at least around a 50-50 position so we can tip you over the scales and make this thing teeter-totter in your direction. That's the whole goal, is so I can push you over the edge and give you a practice to follow and a team to support you, so that for the next rest of this year, when you leave in October, you have not just 2 minutes of Christ consciousness, but you're starting to have days of it. You're starting to let go. You're able to do your own flow. You're able to experience the miracles coming to you. And you don't even have to even think about it. It happens before you thought about it. It's 2 steps ahead of yourself. Living ahead of your now. Exactly. And I've got this all engineered for you. And that is included for you. So the Spiritual Healing Practitioner Training is included for you. Look, let me just cut to the chase. You've had enough time to think about whether this is for you or not. You've been to some of my workshops, perhaps. Perhaps you don't even know about me. Perhaps you're thinking, this guy's nuts, whatever. Well, go to my website, take a few of my free courses, and find out what you don't know that you should know so that you can get some transformation in your life real quick. Start with the 3-2-1 prosperity formula and get your finances right and see what happens after that. I hear stories all the time, people that finally get it. Why did you build your whole ministry on tithing, Matthew? The world kind of seems iffy about that. And I'm like, well, the world's retarded. You know, I don't have to care what the world thinks. That's why I did it, so I could leave that consciousness. Thank God I did. So the 3-2-1. Powerful, powerful. Okay, then you can take the trust, the most powerful force in the universe. You get that book, get it on Amazon, take the course. Take that course, get that book. Then you can go through 0 Point if you want. You can get yourself started right away if you don't know anything about me. And if you know stuff about what I'm teaching, then you know what? Go through the spiritual healing practitioner training. And if you've already done it, do it again. You think I'm done doing it? Well, then why would you be done doing it? You think that this work stops? It doesn't stop until you're done. You go all the way. What use is it for you to get 2 hours of peace in your day and to let 98% of your life remain in the dark? Until you're having days on end of living in perpetual flow, which is where I intend for you to be by the end of this year, going through these trainings systematically. Why would you sell yourself short? Maybe you look at the price tag and you say, I don't know, it's a $9.97 donation for this general admission. Then I got to get there, and the pilots are all dropping like flies in the air because they took the thing, and I just don't feel safe. And well, then if that's you, I just want to challenge you in the way that Michelle challenged me in riding with her to Florida this last year. And I told her I don't do car rides for that long. So there's nothing I like less than sitting in a car or an airplane for hours on end. And she's like, well, not even for me? And I thought, oh, well, that's a good question. And then I looked beyond. This is not her physical self saying that. This is love itself saying, you won't pursue the idea of me, of love? You won't believe in me? You won't believe that love will protect us? You don't believe that love will bring joy to us in any condition? And as soon as I got that, I said, yes, actually I will do this. And I got over all my doubt and my fear. And you know what? And I spent a good amount of money on that trip, and guess what? It all came back multiplied. Because everywhere I invest in love, it has always brought an increase in return. I talked about this in the final course of my Money Master Clinic. And by the way, I will also tie in that as a special bonus that you can go through the Money Master Clinic and watch that. You can watch the replay of that if you have not yet already, if you register yourself by the end of August. Okay, by August 28th. So if you need time to get the funds together, do it. If you want to set up an arrangement and say, listen, Matthew, $997, my family can't do that right now. Would you accept a installment program? I'll say, yes, work with me. I'll work with you. Okay. And if you want to do the V.I.P program, that's $29.97. That comes with all sorts of additional perks. You get your lodging included in the place that we're going to stay, so you'll always be with us. You'll get additional time to just hang out and soak it all in with us. A lot of things that we'll do privately, you can come along with that. You're going to get the 10-hour VIP package with me, good for 365 days. So you've got 20 sessions at a half an hour at the old rate before the rate goes up. All right? You get a lot of other perks. Check it out. There's a lot there. You're going to get a VIP session with me live in person. And I'm going to record it audibly, not visibly, but I'm going to record it where you and I are going to work together on this. So what you're going to get is not just what the classroom gets, the general instruction. I'm not belittling that, but I'm going to give you this with me live, one-on-one too, particularly corresponding to your life. And so all that is there for you, okay? No excuses. If you're supposed to be there, be there. If you're not, then don't. But there's no one else here but you, and the calling is now. So I'll see those who are ready, and you know what to do.